In this video, I'm going to take a look at a tool that I fell in love with as soon as I saw it for the first time and hope that its performance doesn't deter me from that love in the future. It's the Hyper Tough brushless 12-volt die grinder. Have it right here. We're going to take it out of the box and see what comes in the box this time because I haven't opened it yet. And you guys can see the awful charger as it is birthed from this box. First thing out of the box is our die grinder. First look at it, looks like has a brushless signature there. 1.5 amp hour battery, and looks like we have a few speed settings on the back too. Goes from 4,500 all the way up to 20,000. It has a type of handle where you pull it up, then you can pull it in. Battery has some juice too. So you can't just pull the trigger, you have to slide this up, then pull it. We have our really, really awful charger. You see this awful charger plugs directly to the battery, and most chargers that plug directly to a battery are the worst. I have another box here with various attachments. One wire wheel, one, I guess, scrubber, little abrasive pad right here. These screw into these mounts like this, and then you have these little deals like this, and they screw right in here, and then you can mount it to the die grinder. It also comes with this 180 grit sanding pad, and it screws on just like the scouring pad there, or abrasive pad, and you use it just like that. And then here's your wrench. When you're changing the bits, you'll push this button down and turn it. You'll be able to take this little nut off, put your bit in, then tighten it up much like a router. With the 1.5 amp hour battery, the die grinder is just under 8 inches tall, right at 7 7/8. Without any attachments, the die grinder is 4 1/8 inches long. The weight of the tool is 1.5 pounds. Just for comparison with the 6 amp hour battery, it is 2 pounds. One of the things I was really looking forward to getting this tool is the fact that it was so compact and small. It would do a lot of the jobs that my Ryobi one would do, but was really overkill for. So that's one of the main reasons I was excited about getting this tool, even though I still had a die grinder. I think something worth mentioning is that each one of these different attachments have RPM ratings. We kind of talked about it for just a second earlier, but they can be drastically different, so make sure you're reading those. I had this wire wheel in the die grinder and I was kind of playing around with it. But the maximum RPM for this wire wheel is 4,000, which means we need to be in the lowest possible setting, which is 1. Now, I didn't have it in 1, and of course, whenever I was using it, little pieces of it were flying off all over the room. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Like we were talking about, the old scrubber here, what I affectionately call the scrubber, is 12,000 RPM. So that means you can use it on setting 2, but that's as high as you can go. Now, when we're using the attachment for the sanding and the scouring, it might be a little bit hard to make out, but you can go all the way up to 30,000 RPM. And that means you can use it on the highest speed, 4. Now I have a lot of old tools, including these sockets, and I have to clean these things off and put evapor rust on them. So let's take some of the old grungy things I have lying around and try to clean them up with this die grinder and see how it works. Maybe compare it with the Ryobi. I have an old axe head here, and I'm going to try to clean it up with our wire wheel. So I have it set on setting number 1. We're going to run it down the wire wheel a few times and see how it works. Might need a little bit more stank than the Hyper Tough. And I am using the 6 amp hour battery too, in case you guys are wondering, because I put it in here and I just left it in here, even though we can test the difference between the 1.5 and the 6 a little bit later. Now I have my 180 grit sanding pad on there, and I'm just using the attachments that came with it. I have a ton of other stuff, but we're going to just keep it to the set here, just so you can see how their attachments work as well. I'm going to turn on level 2 because that's 10,000 RPM, and let's see what kind of difference this makes. As you can see, that's a more effective way to deal with this particular axe head, just because the wire wheel can't really cut through all the pitting and rust that was on this axe head. Although I will say it's not doing much for the air quality in here. Well, typically I don't not wear a mask while also not ventilating the shop. So I'm gonna take a quick break from this and allow myself to not die of suffocation. In the next test, I wanna see how much power this little die grinder has. And here's how I'm gonna measure it. I have this chunk of metal right here. I'm gonna put it on the scale. 3.5 pounds, I'm gonna zero it out. I'm going to take each battery type, the 1.5, the 2, the 4, and the 6. I'm going to put a battery in the die grinder, going to start using it, put pressure down, and we'll see what is the highest amount of weight I can put on this before it cuts out. I need a bigger piece of metal. All right, I have my railroad track right here. So we're going to see how much weight we can put on it before it cuts out. I switched to the railroad track because it's a little bit more stable. 1.5 amp hour battery. Not coming back on. Let's see what happens when I do this. Comes back on. Got to around 10 pounds. Let's try that one more time. Right under 10 pounds again. 2 amp hour battery. Right around the same amount of weight, looks like. Yep, right around 9 pounds. Let's try the 4 amp hour. Looks like it's still right around the same weight. Yep, right around 9 pounds still. 6 amp hour. Actually cut out a little bit early. Strange. That a little bit higher. Let's give it a couple more on the 6. They're going to end up being right around the same. It may not matter which battery you have. It may be just at that point, it's going to cut out. Just for poops and giggles, I have my Ryobi right angle die grinder, which is much larger. Let's see how that looks with a 4 amp hour battery. The other Ryobi is a much larger form factor here. And let's see if it offers more power. I think it's a pretty good die grinder myself. Let's see what the scale says. I have the Ryobi on speed 1 because speed 1 is 10,000 RPM on this tool. The Ryobi definitely takes a lot more weight. They're 12, 13 pounds on that one. Let's try it again. Whoa, all the way up to 15. So, yeah, the Ryobi's definitely got a little bit more butt than the Hyper Tough. Do you need it? Not for every task, for sure. But there might be a reason to have one of each of these, because tools are awesome, but try to think of another reason probably too. So when I think about 10, 11 pounds compared to 14, 15, 16 pounds, there is a difference there. We're about 70%, 65, 70% of what the Ryobi's doing, but I really, in the back of my mind, expected it to be a little bit worse than that, because we're talking about a tool that sells for $49.95. It comes with a battery and a charger. Even though it's the awful charger, I expected a little bit worse. Again, I come back to the fact that it seems like it's doing pretty good for being what it is. It didn't cut out the whole time I was trying to rat out this hole and make it larger. The Hercules cutoff tool with the 2 amp hour battery, I did a video on it a while back, within the last year or so. And it would cut out all the time. It was so frustrating, and I sort of expected this one to be that way, but it really took a lot of force to get it to cut out. Not as much as the Ryobi, but I was still pretty surprised that it did as well as it did. So I have a stud guard here, and a stud guard is just something you nail up during a rough framing process on a house that protects plumbing pipes and electrical wires so you don't shoot a nail through them. But for some reason, oftentimes the nails find their way into pipes, including the refrigerant lines that I used to run, but that's besides the point. What I'm going to do here is use our two die grinders to take these small holes and use a metal chewing bit, that's what I call it, metal chewing bit, to kind of eat out until we have a larger hole. We're going to see how long each one of these takes with my less than stellar bit, but give you a little bit of comparison about how well this thing works and how it compares with the Ryobi. Well, I reduced the size of the hole on account that this would have taken forever. So here we go with the Hyper Tough. It's got the 6 amp hour battery still in it. I haven't changed this battery, but it has plenty of life left for this task, hopefully. Yeah, Ryobi is really fast, comparatively. And one thing I got to do is I got to figure out what this little bad boy does right here. Mr. Scrubby. I mean, what is this thing? I got to know what it is. I have to find this out. So we got our little book here. It says, "Welcome to the family." So I'm trying to figure out what Mr. Scrubby is. And we looked up here and it says, you get a sanding disc. Yeah, I know what that is. Wire wheel brush. Got that. A non-woven disc with a bristle disc. And this is the non-woven disc. What does that even mean? I thought this was Scrubby. What a bunch of crap. So I've got Mr. Scrubby here. He goes up to 12,000 RPM, so I have it on setting 2 because that is 10,000. And I was just going to see what we could do here on this rust. I don't really know what he's for. What am I supposed to do? See how much it expands out? Yo. It actually cleans some of that stuff off. That's kind of weird. I don't know what to think of this thing now. Let's try it again. Pieces fly off when you get close to the edge, that's for sure. Oh man, look. Mr. Scrubby looks a little rough around the edges. I'm pretty sure that's not what he's intended for. He looks rough, man. Oh no. He has received damage. I second that Mr. Scrubby has received damage. Unfortunately, I knew that Scrubby would probably not survive. My family had come to terms with it, and we had talked about it. And the kids had all, they've gone through the stages of grief and knew that Scrubby would no longer be with us. So in summary, do I like this little die grinder? I really do. It's nice and compact, it's lightweight. It's got 4 modes, but what's better than that is the lowest mode is 4,500. On my Ryobi, it is 10,000 RPM. So I can use some of the attachments for this particular tool that I couldn't for other tools. Some of the attachments that I use, the maximum RPM is in the 4,000 or 5,000 range, and I only be able to use it on this die grinder. So I think that's pretty cool. It seems to be built relatively well for hyper tough tools. I think when we look at this particular tool, it's like looking at a lot of the hyper tough tools. It's really cool, but this is initially. Is the reliability going to be there? I've had a lot of hyper tough tools for a while. A couple of them have broken prematurely, but most of them have done pretty well. So we'll have to see as time goes by. I haven't lost any hyper tough batteries yet. which is something that I worried about because obviously with the batteries being so cheap, you worry about cheap circuit boards and cheap battery cells contributing to an early demise. But so far so good, and I really like this thing. I think it's nice. It's a nice complement to have to this other one. The Ryobi is much heavier, and to use this thing all the time is a little bit more of a chore. When you don't have to, it's nice to have this little bad boy right here. It would be neat to put the Hyper Tough version up against the M12 version because they're pretty similar in the way that they look, and I'd be curious to see how they perform against each other. So coming up soon, I know I'm going to have the new stubby impact wrench, the 3/8 12-volt impact wrench from Hyper Tough. We'll test that one. We'll test it on the new hydraulic force gauge against the old one and maybe a few other wrenches. We'll see what we can do. And the new hammer drill that they have, I'm curious about how much torque it's got. So people were saying that the other one, the drill only, is not very good. And it is only a drill. It's not a hammer drill. And they said it had 250 inch-pounds of torque when I looked at the Walmart claims. That's not a whole lot. And usually they claim more than they get. So I'll be curious. The hammer drill claims 400 inch-pounds, which would put it right there with the Bauer brushless drill. So I don't know if that's going to be good or bad. We're going to find out and see how good it is. It's cheap. It's $44, I think. And you get a battery and charger too. So we'll see. It is the bad charger though. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's anything else you'd like to see or any comments you have, I encourage you to put them below. And I will see you guys on the next one.